Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I've got Kenny Scott with me today. Kenny and I have worked together before. He's worked with Bain in one of our clients. It was an interesting client, a fair-sized client, a few hundred million, distribution company, new chief exec who was ambitious, driven, solid. And he had some ideas of where he wanted the business to go to, and that meant transformational change and fast. So we put a team of people in, but one of the areas that was of particular importance was data, because we needed data to make the decisions for the future and also take stock of what we got, literally take stock in certain places, and then also build in a data lake and start using AI and all those good things. So as part of that team, we brought in Kenny, and Kenny helped the business from a data governance perspective. And it was almost like a blank sheet of paper. So I've got Kenny in with us today because I want to talk a little bit about data governance. And then I guess data governance moving into AI data governance. And I think you'll find from this conversation, Kenny's got some good anecdotal examples. He's engaging. He's don't think, oh, governance, oh, I'm going to switch off now. This will be actually quite good fun. So Kenny, now that I've set you up, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Matt. So I started my career journey back in 1989. I know it doesn't look like that with my youthful looks, but I had 27 years in banking. In that time, I worked a lot with collective investment schemes, a lot of financial work. And after 10 years, I moved into a data space, doing business intelligence, and I've done a year in lean transformation as well, which has given a great foundation for structure and organisation. I then moved into metadata management and data governance out with banking. So we've been in several industries, from funeral planning to renewable energies, debt collection, and it's been a myriad of experiences, both in England, the northeast of England, London, and abroad as well. And for the last 8 years, I've been an independent governance consultant, if you like, to deliver in capability in organisations to get them started on that data governance journey. Our aim's always to, make ourselves redundant, but leaving a legacy of good quality capability in the hands of the organisation we're in, such as we did when I worked with Mark previously. We've left a bunch of people with the skills they didn't have beforehand. So
well, that was a big part of the mandate, wasn't it? We had a sort of blank sheet of paper, a green team. I hope they don't mind me saying that. We're not going to identify the client, of course, so I guess it doesn't matter. But it was all about how do we get the data governance tight? How do we get the processes, procedures, SOPs in place? How do we transfer that knowledge to the existing team and let them run with it? And how long did that take you? Because it's a few hundred million turnover business, wasn't it? With, oh my God, thousands and thousands and thousands of SKUs.
Yeah, so we were there for 6 months. There was a reasonable foundation there to start with, and all we were doing was really polishing that jewel that they had, putting in taking that lean transformation approach to putting some structure in around the documentation, putting in the metadata management where we could with the tools available, a business glossary, as well as a robust root cause problem solving capability. So when we're looking and identifying your issues with data, we're solving them in a way that's not just putting stick and plasters on. But most people got engaged with that as well, because I think once you see people fixing things, as you alluded to at the beginning, data governance can be a dry subject, but once you start seeing some figures and some enthusiasm for people because you've improved their daily working life, then it becomes interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think these things on the surface sometimes don't sound so interesting, but when you get it stuck into them, unless I'm a bit of a nerd, which I probably am, then it is quite interesting, quite exciting. But I've got to say, in terms of when we got the brief from the client about this role, a major component was knowledge transfer, communication across the whole business. That's the reason that we chose you, Kenny, because you have this ability to connect with people and keep that communication line going and adapt to their style. Now, I think it's fair to say not everyone who specializes in governance will have that particular skill set stroke emotional intelligence. Not everyone, but I think the feedback that we got back from the client was extremely good for you. But of course, tell me a bit about sort of governance from your perspective. So you go into an organization and they're using data. Of course, they've been using data a while now. What's the first thing you look at, and what are you looking to leave them with?
So the first thing I'm looking at is the stories of the people using the data on a day-to-day basis, as much as that C-suite that know that they've got some strategic goals in there. And for the first few days, it's listen, 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 because I was in a vehicle organisation and we went to a branch and we said, we're here to do data governance and talk to you about data, and where's your problem? They said, don't use data. We fix vehicles, we fix vans and cars and put tyres on.
Yeah.
And then the conversation started to flow, and then it turned out they said, well, actually, if we knew when we had to change timing belts at a more appropriate time, but we don't have that data available to us, it would save us 6-7 figures for every branch, of which there are 60 or 70 branches in the organisation. So it's about, getting to know people and listening to their stories, because people don't always realise that data is impacting their day-to-day life that's on there. You also need to look at, how old are the systems and mechanisms you've got in there. We can go to some more traditional industries outside of financial services, and they've got some really archaic infrastructure that's in there that people are having to work around. Because I find that data issues do not create themselves; they do not get created by people who are trying to cause disruption. People just want to do their day job. They want to get their customers satisfied, get the product delivered, and go home at the end of the day. So, it's finding those stories.
It's almost like data should be almost like, to some extent, the byproducts or something that happens in the background. We both know it's an enabler, it's a thing that makes things happen, all those good things. But even if people are thinking of it like a secondary thing, that's okay. Their primary job might be to deliver something or to order something or to process something. But when you start looking at it from a data perspective, then you start looking at all different ways to be able to enhance what you do, enhance what you deliver on a personal basis, on a team basis, on a divisional basis, on a group basis. Is that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because one of the things, when you go into a lot of companies, they're looking to make a transformation for the better of their customer or for the bottom line. And I think what often gets forgotten is the working environment of their employees, because people do not like working around things that they can't control. Stress comes from a lack of control in what you're doing. So if you can enable and empower these people to make a better world and make an easier day and more enjoyable environments, less stress, you've got more productivity. So, it's a very intangible benefit. And this is one of the hardest arguments. You can't put pounds and pence easily on data governance. What you can do is reduce risk, improve environments. At the same time, if you do the right changes and improve the data in the right way, the money will come as well from either fines that have been avoided or efficiencies that are out there, and or just staff retention, so you're not retraining all the time.
That's a good point, actually. I love the viewpoint of data from a commercial perspective. There's so many people I've spoken to, clients, prospective clients, who say, we need to get our data governance in order because we don't want another fine. And you're like, well, yeah, I understand that, but what do you need it to do commercially? What would you love it to do? Where do you want to be? How can that enable it? It's those conversations that I think are more interesting.
Yeah, and it's the willingness to change as well. I had someone refer to me the other day that they thought AI could take on some of the heavy lifting of a data governance requirement, when in actual fact it's the opposite. You can't use AI unless you're governing the sources that are going in to use it. It's the first thing I learned in O-grade computing back in 1985, I think it was. We said, garbage in, garbage out, and it's as strong a message now as it was back then.
Well, more so because now we've got, it's not data on steroids, but it's processing on steroids. Now it goes so fast that something that's not quite right can have such a detrimental effect, and then that effect starts to compound, and then how the hell do you get to the truth? So from a data governance perspective, then, if you've got an organization whose data governance isn't quite as good as what it could be, what are some of the symptoms that they'll be experiencing from a board perspective?
So they'll be, assuming there's no regulatory environment or any fines that are in there, there'll be a lower than expected return because there's less efficiency. So the productivity is down. They won't know where things are coming from. So one of the biggest complaints I get going into an organisation is that the key performance indicators at board level are telling them different things for what should be the same story. And it's because you've got several reports going from different roles in that C-suite. The CFO's got a report, the CRO's got a report, purportedly the same thing, telling two different figures. And not either of them can tell you exactly where that's come from. And that's where that metadata management isn't in place to visualize this report is taking it from this source data. And along the way, the quality checks that go with it. And it's that's probably one of the biggest symptoms is a confusion at C-suite, but also to compound that, it's always a top-down and bottom-up conversation, because on the shop floor, you'll have people who are just facing frustration on a daily basis, having to rework or not being able to deliver what they need to do, or taking 5 of them to do something that only one of them should be able to do with the correct tools, especially after a digital transformation. How many organisations now do you see? You've got a handheld, restaurants, shoe shops, everywhere you go, delivery, everything is now coming through an app to a device, and that is all data. So you feel that it's the top and tail story, though.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we saw one particular business, and they were getting reports, just like you were saying earlier, they were getting reports through, and some of the data in the reports wasn't quite the same, but they're all looking at the same KPI type of thing. So what they did was they took that, they manipulated it and pulled it into another program that was the universal suite for reporting. I'm like, hold on. Hold on. What about if the person who knows to times that figure by 0.25 because there's an anomaly somewhere in the system? What if they're off, hit by a bus, whatever it is? Isn't it better just to fix it? Yeah. Well, we can't get to the root cause of it. Well, it's definitely possible to get to the root cause of it. You just have to reverse engineer it and do it step by step. Is that right? Is that what you have to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's absolutely. There's also the fact that if you're a big enough organisation that's going to have an independent audit or even an internal audit, if you can't evidence that something's happened or how it has happened, it's as good as not. If you can't evidence where that is, you could have just made that figure up. And I've seen that happen, by the way, that people just manipulate it to tell their story. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book when it comes to boardroom conversations. So having that irrefutable fact-based demonstration of where we are is what everybody strives for.
Yeah, I understand that. I've heard a phrase, single source of truth, quite a lot over the last maybe 10 years. What do they mean by that?
Well, a lot of this comes through acquisition or mergers of organisations, and you've maybe got 5 or 6 different databases. For example, it's got customers on it. You can have the same customer on 7 or 8 of those databases, but they've all got a different customer ID. They're getting different marketing emails from all 7 of your subsidiaries. And what you actually want to do is understand that one individual, because your marketing is based on your unique customer data set. Because if you are only seeing one of those 7, you're not getting the full picture of that person. But the same applies for products. If you've got several product databases, 7 different sort of ERPs, because you've merged a couple of companies together, you've got sort of change differences in description, possibly different prices, and possibly sourcing from different suppliers. And what you want to do is bring that together in one place, have it correct survivorship rules and the correct quality over it, and then prove the journey from that single source through to your consumption, whether that's a web page or a KPI report.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good tip. I mean, you see that a lot. I speak to some companies and they'll say, maybe the question I ask is, so how are you getting on with the acquisition integration? And if I speak to the finance director, let's say the CFO, often it'll be, it's done. And they mean it's done from a balance sheet perspective, not from an operational perspective. Mm-hmm. And then you speak to the IT director and they'll be like, well, we managed to API this and we managed to do this, and then we've got a workaround and a bridge for this and a fix for this. So actually we just get the same information. We'll just wait to do the integration. I'm like, sounds like there's a lot of human intervention into that. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want to start losing people jobs, but that's where the mistakes could be. And very often it's a case of, well, either we haven't got the mindset to do it, we're going to wait until we've done another few acquisitions. There's lots of reasons why not to do it. But from your perspective, if you want to get to a single source of truth, you have to do it. Is that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's essential if you're going to get the best value out of your data. A lot of companies have got the strap line about data being a valuable business asset and what drives their success. But it's difficult, to do these matches, to do these survivorship. It's not an easy task. And it puts a lot of people off. But it's not just multiple sources of data, it's multiple existences of data. We had an organisation we worked with before that they would spin up an SQL database as soon as they needed to do a new report. And they ended up with 300 different databases. And then about half of them were doing the same as everybody else. You could have done the same thing with about 5 or 6. So it's not just about single source, it's about perpetuating that single message all the way through to consumption.
Well, it sounds like it's a mindset to have. It sounds like, to keep thinking of it this way, to simplify. But from a governance perspective, what you can do is you can help them understand why and then what to put in place. Is that the way that you normally do it?
Yeah, so what we look to do is we split our data down into domains. So by a domain or a subject area, so we're talking customer data, product data, risk or finance data, that you can then allocate an owner to that data across the whole organisation. Because some organisations try and do it by system, but that means you have a different set of rules in your client system as you've got to your ERP, as you've got to your data science data sets. You've got different instances, all of which have got different rules. You need that consistency. So then we would look at, again, C-suite to have a single point of ownership, a single accountability, but then using their hierarchy in the organisation to delegate the improvements and the application of the strategy that they want to do. But you need to have, and that ownership should be within the business. I see so many data governance initiatives coming out of IT departments, and IT departments are filled generally with people who want to do things in bulk with technology and efficient approach. That's what they're good at. That's what they're great at doing there. However, for me, data governance is a people business, and it should be more on the business side of it because it affects the individuals on a day-to-day basis, and they're the people responsible for getting the customer satisfied and bringing the income in as well. Can't do it without technology though. I mean, they are totally the enabler for it.
Yeah, it's a great point actually, because when I think about the scenario where, let's say, they've done an acquisition and they've now got 3 or 4 different ERP systems, and they're eventually looking to get one overarching ERP system. And we all know that's bloody expensive. It's going to take a long time, and there could even be some firings at board level for getting it wrong. This is a really critical piece of work, really important. But if you've got, let's say, someone who's responsible for the order to cash process, but they're responsible for that on a group-wide basis, then, with the right training, with the right steer, with the right tools, they can make sure that all those different systems are using the same wording, the same phraseology. Everything is identical. So now when it comes to cell match, it's really easy.
Yeah. So for me, the fundamentals of data governance after ownership is metadata management. Knowing in business terms what your data means, but also tagging it and seeing it as it goes from soup to nuts through the organisation. Then you've got data quality so that you can test that at all those points, whether you are a system owner, a process owner, or a data owner. And then you need to have a robust issue management process, because knowing things are not right is not enough. However, also at one of the banks I worked at, we had nearly 300 data issues. You didn't try and solve them all. You prioritize them for your best value to the organisation, and even regulators, as long as you know where your problems are and the risk accepted for the right reasons, it shows an awareness. It's the apathy that's disliked by auditors and by regulators. As long as you show control and understanding, you don't fix everything, but you know what needs to be fixed. Therefore, you can make a fact-based approach to what you're going to change. And that's what gives at all levels of the organisation.
We've seen that sort of conscious decision making. We've definitely seen that through the organisations that we work with. They're not saying phrases like we don't want to fix everything, but what they're saying is we're going to prioritise it and we're going to show that we understand it, and eventually we'll get to it. But let's prioritise the more important stuff first. And I think that's a great way to do it. Let's talk a little bit about AI, because AI is one of these subjects that everyone's talking about it. Everyone's got their own perception of it. Everyone's got a different view of how they're going to do it, how it's going to work for their business, all this kind of stuff. And I actually think it's more important. The emergence of AI is probably a more important event than the start of the internet, in terms of you can do so much with AI, but it also rests on fundamentals because you're just automating or processing stuff faster. So I think we know what to do to some extent, but a lot of companies are still really hesitant to start their AI journey part of me thinks it's because anything's possible. So where the hell do you start? Do you find the same thing? What's the reason for your clients are not going sort of head first into it and throwing everything at it?
I'm actually probably seeing the other side of the coin there, Mark, because I'm seeing a lot of organisations who are going head first into AI without first making the consideration of what is my foundation I've got in here. So so you're using OpenAI, that's a different conversation. That is Wild West. But most organised industries will look to have a closed source AI output that they've got there. But even then, if you don't control and understand what those sources are, you're throwing rubbish potentially out the door there. So I'm actually seeing, I'm more afraid for these companies that are saying, yeah, we're putting in ahead of AI and we've got somebody to deliver our AI because we want to do X, Y, and Z. But they're giving less consideration to fixing those fundamentals of governance first, or in parallel to then go and deliver something new that's in there. I have seen the side of the coin, as you said as well, where people are resistant, but I find that that's probably lesser in the circles I've been around, because everybody's so excited about it. It's a buzzword that goes on strategies, it goes on to people's performances for the year at all levels of the organisation. But as an actual fact, it is, as you said, it's huge, it's important, it's both dangerous and opportunistic. But it's a bingo word at the moment. Wherever you go, I get more hits on LinkedIn through my profile mentions of AI than anything else that I've put in there in my whole career. And it's non-stop. It's anything from marketing to employment to recruitment and product, software, as well as services. It's just
we're seeing some mainly larger clients. Actually, across the range, what we're seeing is an element of, no, we're still thinking, looking at it. And they're the ones that I think that are being really truthful. And then the ones that are saying, yes, we've started. But actually what they've done is they've hired one, or they've hired a team, a small team of people. And you actually ask what's got done. Not a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, genuinely not a lot. So even these companies that are going for it sort of head first, or certainly it looks like that because they've got this team in, nothing's getting done. And I think some of that is because that what they've not done is they've not fixed their data governance. And if I was to say to the CEO, CFO, someone that controls or influences the balance sheet, how confident are you in your data when we start talking about single source of truth? I'll be amazed if anyone gives me an answer in the 90%. I'll be amazed, because they just don't have that confidence. And this is where you come in, isn't it?
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's putting those mechanisms in place, and that's why the ownership should originate at C-suite, where they set the standard, they set the strategy, say this is our goal. And because data governance strategy and data strategies in general should be totally restricted to the business deliverable, to the business strategy. They're two layers of the same onion. They've got to have that governance delivering. You've got to say what your business is going to deliver first, and then say, right, let's get those robust sources in there and make it work. But not only sources, it's about monitoring. It's not just enough to put something in place and saying, right, I know when my data starts, I know how it moves, I quality check it. But then what happens after that? Where is it consumed? How does it go in and out of the organisation? Are people doing end user computing, which is the bane of any data governance program? It's people with Excel or access to Access or other more powerful tools that you can get desktop these days, and they just do whatever they want to do because, and this is where governance, whether it's for AI or the normal sort of data processes, if it's too restrictive and it's too bureaucratic, you turn people off, and it's like water coming through a leaky roof. It will find whatever path it needs to get to where it needs to go, and you find that you just generate more problems. So you need to have a balance of openness, but with restriction, with a degree of rigor, not flexibility. And that's why the owners in the business, because they're the people who can say, yeah, if you make that change, that's going to benefit us or not.
Yeah, and is there toolkits and systems and things like that a business can deploy to make sure their data governance is strong?
So not data governance per se, but there are tools out there that will track your metadata, that will give you, visualize your metadata, your data journeys, but also give you some marketplace capabilities. So if you want to consume data, you've got to go through a rigorous process to be approved to use it. You maybe set up data squads to say, right, I need to create this new data set for a new regulatory report, and I'm taking some customer data and finance data and some risk data, so I need to engage these owners And there are tools in the market that will workflow all of that. And then once you get it back, it will tell you what is the quality of the data, where's the best version of that data to consume and deliver it. And then it will put it into the marketplace again and say, this is an output. So somebody comes and asks for that next week, say, oh, somebody done it last week, so here, go and consume it. Because again, this is one of the duplication's got to be one of the biggest threats to integrity of data, because people just don't necessarily know. Someone's doing something very similar. It might not be exact, it might be 90% the same, but again, it gives you a sound starting place rather than starting from the beginning. But data management tools, there's quality tools out there as well. And you've got your normal sort of change tools, your Jiras and your other Kanban solutions to try and organise it. But that's more of a change organisation piece. But there's definitely strong tools out there. Not cheap, usually as well.
When's anything cheap? But if I'm a CEO of an organisation and I'm pretty keen on getting good, strong governance, because ultimately I know it's going to benefit me and benefit my customer. I mean, that's the reason that I want really strong governance. And also I don't want to fine. But ultimately, if I want to go down this process, then where do I start and how disruptive could it be?
Yeah, so I think you start by forming a data governance council at that highest level to start to gather the stories and understand what data governance challenges or data challenges we've got and where we want to go, and then delegate some people into supporting that structure. Then build your data governance KPIs. So as you say, I've got 7 different versions of our customer data. So our strategy is to reduce that to a single source and make sure that the outputs are not duplicated elsewhere. So you set those strategies there, and for each one of your data domains, you put your controls around it to make it happen. Yeah. You then need to win the hearts and minds. Data governance and data in general is a people business. You need to make people want to do it. And again, by doing that, you're trying to solve their problems as you're doing it. So once you've set the strategy from your data governance councils, you can break them down into your individual domains, such as customer, and then possibly having some working, so you're layering it down into smaller and smaller pieces of actionable challenge. And then you roll them back up and say, right, well, I've fixed 4 small things over here and 3 small things over there. That then reflects in that overall data governance scorecard. Just like any other part of the business, you need your KPIs and your targets to make sure you're making progress.
That's interesting. KPIs and targets for data governance. I can only imagine some people out there, some clients out there thinking, what? Surely data governance is just something where I put all these things into these boxes and I write on it, don't touch. And there's only one person that's allowed to touch it. Surely that's enough. But like you said, data is more about people than anything else. So you need to put that structure in it.
Things can deteriorate without you touching it because of poor architectural decision making at the beginning. So if you remember back in COVID, there was a problem with the reporting figures back in the day because they ran out the number of rows in Excel spreadsheets because they'd architected a data solution that worked for the first 3 or 4 months and then hit an issue, but there was no trigger to say there was an issue because there wasn't the right sort of data architecture. And that's a very important part of the preventative nature of data governance is robust data architecture at a system level, at a metadata level. And this is where greenfields obviously are at an advantage because you can start by building the metadata, then building the systems. But unfortunately, most organizations, you've got legacy, you then need to try and map that legacy. And that's one of the toughest jobs there is out there because it's a lot. I mean, we pointed a metadata collection tool in one of the banks that was in the COBOL mainframe, and it brought back 17 million data points. There's not a team big enough in any organisation that does data governance that's going to catalogue that correctly. So it's all about where are the priorities and hence the KPIs. Where are our key data sets? What quality do they need to hit? How many business terms do we need to have over them? How many people know? So you get a data management maturity assessment from some of the bigger data practices, and they'll come in and tell you exactly how well your data is perceived. It's not all about the actuality. And another example I had in one of the banks is that they had a warehouse, and everybody says we can't trust the warehouse. The data can't be trusted. And we went, what are you basing that on? And it was anecdote. So we went in and done a data quality assessment over the key data in there. And you know what? 95% of that data was spot on. There were 1 or 2 fields. One of them was date of birth, and it was poorly populated, especially for women. And that's because back in the 70s and 80s, it was considered rude to ask a woman for a date of birth. So they just didn't calculate it. You know, so there's all this hidden stuff that if you don't do your profiling of that data and your analysis of it, you never know. You know, and this single source of the truth brings that together. So you might not have it in your teller system, but you might have it in your credit card system. So you can sort of minimize that by building a bigger profile of individuals.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes complete sense. I think from a sort of board perspective, you know, if you don't have a single source of truth, first of all, you're not on your own. But if you don't have a single source of truth, then there's a reason to start looking at data governance, because, you know, that should be the backbone of it. But then on top of that, if you don't have KPIs around data governance, then how are you measuring how effective it is? Or are you not measuring it and you're going to wait for the fine? And it really is, it shouldn't be about avoiding fines. It should be about maximizing revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you know, I think people just have to look at it in a different way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's about doing the right thing. It's also about reducing rework. I mean, if you're sending a regulatory report out, apart from the fact that the regulator will have some some words for you if it's incorrect on a consistent and regular basis, if you're getting that back to rework it, that's an underlying cost to your organisation. And going back to what I said before, it's undermining the people that are working there. They're having to do the same thing over and over again, and they know it's going to come back to them, and it can be soul destroying. So yes, it's got many facets, both financial, regulatory, and just for the mental stability of your workforce.
I agree with that. I think you touched on something really interesting in terms of, I think when we speak to investors, there's a couple of things that they really hate. One is surprises, of course. And the next thing is doing stuff twice, or asking twice, or something like that, where it's this repetitive, why can't it just get done type of style. And, you know, it sounds like a lot of that could be eradicated through having really good sort of data governance. And hopefully, from our discussion and from the way that you've communicated and my endorsement in terms of you worked for us before and had fantastic feedback, you know, it doesn't have to be this dry subject. It actually can be a really commercial subject that everyone can get behind, can't it?
Yeah, and part of it is demystifying and taking the fear away. None of these problems are new. None of these problems are unsolvable. It's about creating the facts, understanding the priorities, and taking the right action.
Nice. That's a great way to finish this podcast. Thank you ever so much for giving us the time, Kenny. I think a lot of people would have found this really interesting. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to work together again soon, very soon.
No, my pleasure, Mark. Thanks very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Kenny. Bye.